This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, good morning again, everybody. This is Wandering Through the Big Book, session number 9. And 2 weeks ago, we did Bill's story number 1, and we got up to his bottom, or we got down to his bottom. And then last week, we did Bill's story number 2, and we got to his spiritual experience. And so this week we're trying to finish up his story and talk about some of the fundamental principles of our program. Bill says, and if I seem a little scattered this morning, it's because I am. Let's see. Bill says at the bottom of page 13, just before that, a reminder that what these sessions are really about is we're talking about how to use the big book to deepen and strengthen your recovery, to try to help another person do the same thing, and finally to try to become trusted servants of our fellowship. That's pretty important. So the real topic here is, how do you use Bill's story to deepen your own recovery, or to try to help somebody else to do the same, or to try to become a trusted servant? And I hope you're getting that in Bill's story, you discover some of the fundamental parts of our program, and then it's, how do you take that to another? And we do that by reading the book together, one-on-one, reading the book together. And a lot of you have tried this way of reading where you each read a line instead of somebody reading a paragraph and the other person can doze off or let their mind wander. When you're reading one sentence at a time, each of you, it keeps you quite a bit more involved. And it's just a more intense experience. Plus, you can stop anytime. You don't have to remember what you want to say when you get to the end of the paragraph or you get a turn. So anyway, I'm at this on page 13 at the bottom. And Bill says, after talking about after his spiritual experience, and Ebby's coming to visit, and Ebby, it's at the bottom, my friend. My friend promised when these things were done, I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator, that I would have the elements of a way of living which answered all my problems. And then he goes on to say, it starts with a belief in the power of God, and then says those 3 things that you see all the time: honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And that these are essential ingredients. In the spiritual appendix, it talks about these being, I think it says essential, and then it says, but these are indispensable. And the but always confused me, because what he's really saying, and I don't think he means but, he means and. Honesty, open-mindedness, willingness are, they're not only essential, you're not going to get anywhere without them. And we talk often about honesty. The biggest problem with honesty is not me with you, it's me with me. It's me honestly looking at my state of mind and trying to understand, how did I get here? How did I get to this feeling of hopelessness? One of the points, well, make it now. Bill has this lights out spiritual experience. And in 1944, he's 9 years in, he goes into this deep depression that goes on for 11 years. He's where and during that time, he did all this stuff. They did the second edition, they did the 12 and 12, which meant coming forth with the traditions, establishing the service structure, all this different stuff. He did that while depressed. But what I'm really trying to say is, we want what alcohol gave us, which was instant relief and instant feeling good. All of a sudden, all this stuff that was bothering me doesn't bother me. Life's okay. I can go on instantaneously. And the only real problem is that we have this allergy that means we can't drink safely. You know, if I could be drinking safely, I would have had a drink an hour ago when I'm trying to get ready for this thing, you know, but I just know I can't. And I've been in long enough to know, we used to have, old Bob used to say it around here, understanding that AA will do for me slowly what alcohol did for me quickly. All those good feelings that I got from alcohol will return, and they'll return with a stability and a presence far beyond the way it was for me drinking. But I cannot drink safely, and so I have to gut it up and be willing to patiently, tolerantly, kindly, and lovingly endure, go through what we have to go through. And our examples to each other are really important. So the thing I'm trying to hit on is, I would have the elements of a way of living which would answer all my problems. You know, that Fred says it at the end of More About Alcoholism. Quite as important was the discovery that spiritual principles would solve all my problems. And then he says what for me is one of the more beautiful statements in the book: I have since been brought into a way of living infinitely more satisfying, and I hope more useful than the life I lived before. And this guy's a high bottom drunk. This guy had a great life. He's not in the gutter. He's a successful businessman, and he's got a nice wife and family, lives in New York City. I mean, he's got it going on. And he says it's infinitely more satisfying, and I hope more useful. Just a wonderful statement if we will stick at it. And the purpose of our meetings and our one-on-one interactions is to keep us sticking at it. So one of the concepts that we hit in this in our opening readings, it's number 3. If you're as seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe you have but 2 alternatives. So you'll remember that How It Works says we stood at the turning point. Now, the turning point means I got 2 alternatives. Do I keep on doing what I'm doing, or do I make a turn? Right? So this is saying, if you're as seriously alcoholic as we were, you're standing at the turning point, and you only get 2 choices. One, go on to the bitter end, trying to blot out of your mind how miserable and unsatisfied you are with your life, how meaningless it seems to be. Or the other, and we've changed words up here, the other, it says, the book says, accept spiritual help. We're flipping to page 83, where it says, so we ask our Creator each morning in meditation to show us the way of patience and tolerance and kindness and love. That's the turning point. How It Works says it doesn't tell you go on to the bitter end, but what it says is we ask God's protection and care with complete abandon. You know, have I ever done that? I don't know. I think I've had some moments. The complete abandon is a challenging thing for me. I got a lot of stuff, mental and physical stuff, that I'm trying to hold on to, that I'm working on it. But and the original manuscript said, throw yourself under God's protection and care with complete abandon. They softened it between the original manuscript and the printed version. But that's what they keep trying to say. These are your only 2 choices. And the hardest thing, I think, for alcoholics, at least for me, was experimenting with prayer. I saw somebody else doing it. I saw, after our 7 a.m. meeting, this guy would walk into the chapel, get on his knees and say out loud. I was right there kneeling beside him, but I wasn't going to say anything out loud. And he said, God, keep me away from a drink or a drug today. And I thought, wow, this he's taking this prayer stuff seriously. I would say today prayer is the fundamental element of my way of life. It all starts with prayer. And I think the work that we go through, and this is an Oxford group thing, is establishing the conditions under which prayer can work. My job is establishing the conditions under which I can have a relationship with God. And then God will do God's work. My part is getting ready, getting honest, getting open, and getting willing. And then God does God's work. So, okay, so we're still in Bill's story, and we're starting on page 12, and we hit this last time, but we're just gonna review it again. So this is a turning point. I'm in the middle of page 12, Bill's story. My friend then suggested what seemed a novel idea. This is a new idea, rather than me try to agree to your vision of God. He says, why don't you choose your own conception of God? My question is, what's Bill going to do? That statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered many years. Wow, is that a powerful statement? I don't think of Bill as an intellectual guy, actually, based on his behavior, but that's what he's saying. That icy intellectual mountain, that's judgment. That's contempt prior to investigation. That's my mind snapping shut. That's me deciding what is, and not being able to question it. And Bill, he spends the whole time before that paragraph above remained in me the vestiges of my old prejudice. The word God still aroused a certain antipathy. This is all contempt prior to investigation. When the thought was expressed, there might be a God personal to me. I didn't like the idea. Blah blah blah. And how is somewhere he says my mind snapped shut. But when Ebby says this is a fundamental deal, the God of your own understanding, which you'll never understand. The good news is that you can make the God of your understanding work. You can absolutely make it work. Bill's an example of that. The bad news is you're never going to understand it. I'm never going to understand. I was saying earlier, I don't understand how my phone works. I don't understand how this little slab of, metal, plastic, glass, whatever, a battery, I haven't the foggiest idea. It doesn't mean I can't communicate with you. Doesn't mean I can't do all kinds of stuff on that little phone. Well, we're trying to say God's the same thing. You don't have to understand it. You just have to go to it and humbly ask. That thing that Joyce read, number 5. This is the ultimate promise. Just to the extent that I humbly rely on God and try to be the person I think God wants me to be, just to the extent that I do that, I will experience spiritual serenity, knowing that though my body and my mind are going to suffer and die, my spirit has been around a long time and it's not dying with my body and my mind. I'm going to be okay. It's going to be okay. My spirit has been created by my creator, and it's under the grace. It lives in the grace of that creator. And I need fear no evil, to throw something in biblical terms. But it all starts with me having a willingness to at least approach. Bill says somewhere, oh yeah, it's at the bottom of 12. He says, the real significance of my experience in the cathedral burst upon me for a brief moment. I had needed and wanted God. There had been a humble willingness to have God with me, and he came. And then what happens? Soon, the sense of his presence was blotted out by worldly clamors, mostly those within myself. And so it had been ever since, how blind I had been. So now he's back at the hospital, separated from alcohol for the last time. And they run through the steps. This is with Ebby, and this is Oxford Group stuff. The steps have not been written. 12 steps have not been written. I humbly offered myself to God as I understood him or didn't understand him, to do with me as he would. I placed myself unreservedly under his care and direction. I don't know what to say. Whatever I've done, I feel a relationship. I can't say I've ever done it unreservedly. I've always got a family holdback going on. I admitted for the first time that of myself, I was nothing, that without God, I was lost. There's that wonderful line, God is either everything or else God is nothing. That's the turning point. Which one am I going to pick? And I've been taught that when you read that part of the book with somebody, you are to ask. This says we have to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else God is nothing. What is our choice to be? That's what the book says. So the question is, if God is everything, what is my fear? And if God is nothing, what is my fear? Well, that's real clear to me. If God is everything, I'm going to have to do what God tells me to do. And I don't want to do what God tells me to do. I want to do what I want to do. I want what I want, and I want it now, like all the king babies of the world. But then the realization is, what is my fear if God is nothing? And my instant response for me is, I'm screwed. If God is nothing, I'm SOL. I'm in trouble. And so anyway, all right, let's see where we are. So I placed myself unreservedly under his care and direction. I admitted for the first time that of myself, I was nothing, that without God, I was lost. I ruthlessly faced my sins and became willing to have my newfound friend take them away, root and branch. I have not had a drink since. Okay, so I think you've heard I'm really on this Jesuit kick, and just reading everything I can get a hold of about the spiritual exercises of Saint Ignatius and how they do this stuff. And I'm telling you, it's so in sync with our program and our steps. But they use these old, archaic, difficult terms, and so I have to do what I've done with the big book, which is, if I need different words, I substitute different words. If I want to put things in a different order, I put them in a different order. It's whatever you can make work for you. So they'll use this word sin a lot, and for a lot of us, that's not. And they use the word evil. They distinguish between the evil spirit and the good spirit, and that doesn't work for me. What is working for me is distinguish between a loving spirit and a selfish spirit. And I find that most of my negative behavior is based on self-centered fear. And that means I'm listening to and letting for me, my human personality, my ego personality, drive me, make decisions for me. And I wind up doing things, and then they turn into habits. And by the time they're habits, you're in deep trouble because you're on a railroad track and it's going where it's going. And it's really hard to, Emmett Fox says that the only way you can really, he calls it the law of substitution. The only way you can really break a bad habit is by substituting a new habit. Coming up with something else to do. When you want that cigarette, you got to come up with something else to do. If you're not able to say, God, do you want me to smoke? And then when God says, are you kidding me? Of course I don't want you to smoke, then you can claim the power. Another Emmett Fox thing, claim the power. Then give me the power to not smoke. Tell me what to do instead of smoking. Well, why don't you chew some gum or whatever? Okay, so don't get lost. So sin. So I think for me, sin in the context of our book and our steps is when I turn to my self-reliance to tell me what to do, and then I act on my self-reliance. And the book says the startling thing about the real source of my fear is the failure of my self-reliance. So if I'm going to do something different, the first step is to admit the failure of my self-reliance. We say it differently. We say admit our powerlessness over alcohol, which we all see pretty quickly. And then we say that our lives had become unmanageable. For me, I'd almost like to say I'm powerless over alcohol. I'm powerless over my own personality. I can't not do what my personality wants me to do. And I keep turning to my self-reliance to tell me how to live my life. I'm not capable of acting on a different set of spiritual principles. And I think further that fear is the symptom of my agnosticism. My self-reliance is the result of my agnosticism because I do not believe that God is going to step into the gap when I ask for help. I just don't believe it. And what we wind up trying to do is, well, just experiment, just try it. But here's the thing, you can't just try it once and then decide it doesn't work and turn away. You have to try it on a daily basis for a while before you will find out whether this seeking God's guidance and power, which sometimes is called the grace of God, seeking that so you can operate, I love this, operate under the influence of God instead of operating under the influence of your self-reliance. That's the turning point. That's what I think that reading's saying. If you're a real alcoholic, you got two choices, self-reliance or God. And our work is trying to support your decision to go for God instead of trying to justify your self-reliance. Okay, so what is sin? So sin is me turning to and acting on my self-reliance, which I've been doing for 3/4 of a century. For a long time. I mean, it just takes a while to do this, to operate this other way. My schoolmate visited me. I fully acquainted him with my problems and deficiencies. We made a list of people I had hurt, toward whom I felt resentment. I expressed my entire willingness, this is step 8, to approach these individuals, admitting my wrong. Never was I to be critical. That's contempt prior to investigation. That's intolerant. We pray to be shown the way of tolerance. That means I am not judging you or me for that matter. I was to write all such matters to the utmost of my ability. I was to test my thinking by the new God consciousness within. Common sense would thus become uncommon sense. I was to sit quietly when in doubt, asking only for direction and strength. This is step 11, asking only for your will for me and the power to carry that out. To meet my problems as God would have me meet my problems. Never was I pray for myself, blah, blah, blah. Then only, these are establishing the conditions as well for prayer to actually work. And then that statement that we talked about. So I just want to focus a minute on this test my thinking. So many of you are aware of a book by Wally Patton. Wally Patton wrote Back to Basics, and he wrote a later book called How to Listen to God. What a title, huh? How to Listen to God. And it's based on this pamphlet, a 4-page pamphlet. If you go into the search bar and you put How to Listen to God, I think this pamphlet will come right up, and you can download it and print it for nothing. The book is another matter. It's a fairly thick book, so this How to Listen to God is a really an Oxford group book, and it hits this thing about testing your experience against these 4, they called them 4 absolutes. And Bill Wilson, I also have a copy here of his personal story that he tells at the convention in the early 50s. Dr. Bob had died, and I don't know whether it's in Cleveland. I think it's in Toronto, and it doesn't matter, but he's telling his story and telling it again. And this time it's 25 pages instead of 16. And each page is twice what the big book pages are. Because remember, they were trying to make it look bigger than it was. So, wide margins and big print, and this is a smaller print and smaller margins. So I'm saying it's 50 pages instead of 17. And you learn a lot, and you particularly learn a lot about the third part of this deal. When we tell our stories, it's what we were like, how it was before we stood at the turning point and made a different decision. And then what happened? How did we establish our relationship with God? And finally, what we are like now. Well, we're getting the end of Bill's story is what he's like now, and really it's the whole history of the fellowship. And when you get into this talk, it's in the book, the first book that the conference published after the big book in the 12 and 12. It's called Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age. Which oddly enough is ACOA, Adult Children of Alcoholics. But it's just great. And Sam Shoemaker speaks in this book, and Father Ed Dowling, who was a Jesuit, by the way, speaks in this book. And it's really a font of information of how AA got through they first talk about the flying blind years, and then they talk about the years of the coming of age to where they're a solid fellowship that has traditions and is able to maintain itself and survive. One of the things, just a little digression, but so St. Ignatius, he did these spiritual exercises, and part of that was this daily examine, which is our step 10, or you could say the 11th step evening review. They're very similar. It's where you're looking back over your behaviors of the day and you're examining them, and you're asking God's forgiveness and guidance, And at the end of it, you resolve to live differently going forward. It's just beautiful. And that this one author, this Mark Thibodeau, uses 5 R words, and his R words are relish, request, review, repent, and resolve. As is my way, I've changed them a little bit, and I use the word rejoice, which is just an expression of gratitude over what am I grateful for right here, right now. And I tell you stuff, as soon as I say, what are you grateful for right here, right now? Boom. I mean, I'm grateful I can talk. I'm grateful I can breathe. I'm grateful I have a house. It's just I start this reverse of resentment, ask me what I'm resentful about, and boom, 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 whatever. But so I use the word rejoice instead of relish. When he says request, I've been using the word reveal, because I've heard from you all often that things change when I ask God to reveal its presence to me. It's like, and Bill says it at the moment before his awakening. He says something similar to what Fitzmayo said. If there is a God, show yourself. Show yourself. It's a request. Reveal yourself. I'm tired of being stuck in my own thinking. Please reveal yourself. So that's request and reveal is the second part of this examine. Third is review. Well, I like to use the word reflect, because review sounds a little sterile to me. But if I reflect, I'm really trying to, and it's another Ignatian thing, use my imagination to get back into whatever it is, to try to imagine the scene more fully than just intellectually reviewing it. They use the word repent, which is okay, except all I see is a guy on the corner carrying a Bible saying, repent, repent, but it's a great word. It means rethink. It comes from the PENT, is a Latin thinking thing, and repent is think again and make a different choice. Choose God instead of choosing your ego. And finally, resolve is just going forward. That's the second part of step 11, the power to carry out your will for me, the power to behave the way I think you want me to behave. So, okay, now I've gone way off, so we're running out of time as usual. I was to test my thinking. So they use honesty, purity, unselfishness, and love. And the purity is the hardest one, was the hardest one for me, because I think if I am honest, if I am unselfish, and if I am loving, that is pure. But this was an Oxford group thing, and Bill, the 4 words show up several times right in a row in our book, in the 4th column of a resentment inventory. Where have I been? Dishonest, selfish, self-seeking, or afraid. They show up in step 11. They show up a number of times. I think they show up in step 10. When selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear show up, when they show up, not if they show up, when they show up. What am I going to do about it? Or you go, it gives us the protocol for dealing. Pray at once for removal, share with somebody, make amends if called for, turn your mind to God, how can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. So, okay. So that's what this test my thinking. And then we already talked about that last paragraph. So I'm looking at page 14, and I think we hit on this last week. Simple at the top of 14, simple but not easy. A price had to be paid. It meant the destruction of self-centeredness. And we talked, I must turn in all things to the creator of light. I like every time it uses a male term or even a female term, I like to go to creator. You know, I experience some confusion on the human level. I know I can create things. I know I have an influence on what I eat, how often I go to the gym, you know, how I think. I have an influence on that based on what I choose to read, just like on what I choose to eat. I can affect my physical appearance and my mental attitude by things that I do. But when you get to my soul, I don't have a clue. And it's real easy for me to say, okay, whatever you are, I know I didn't create my soul. And I don't even know why my soul is here. You know, you remember that Thomas Merton prayer that, I mean, this guy's a spiritual giant. He's saying, I don't know what I'm doing, you know, but I think that the desire to please you does in fact please you. I don't like the word please, but the idea, I am here to do your will for me, not to do my will for me. Page 68 says, we are here to play the role God has assigned, not the role my ego personality has assigned me and you, by the way. So it's a great question. Do you think you created yourself? And if you do, then you figure, well, I'm a gift to me. And so I can do whatever I want. In fact, that's my job, is doing whatever I want. If I've got a creator, then it winds up for me creating this obligation. Well, maybe I better check in with this creator dude and find out, you know, well, why did you create me? What am I doing here? What do you want me to do here? So I like the word creator, and I love the 7-step prayer starts with that. And I love the line on 83. We ask our creator each morning in meditation to show us the way, patience, tolerance, kindness, and love. These were revolutionary and drastic proposals, but the moment I fully accepted them, the effect was electric. There was a sense of victory, followed by such a peace and serenity as I had never known. There was utter confidence. I felt lifted up as though the great clean wind of a mountaintop blew through and through. God comes to most men gradually, but his impact on me was sudden and profound. So he calls Silkworth. And Silkworth, you know, he says what Jung says on page 26. To me, these experiences are phenomena. He didn't mean it. We'll talk about it when we get there. But Silkworth is saying, I don't know what's happened, but you better hang on to it. This is way better than you were before. And then Bill has this vision of AA happening and growing, and it's all based on one alcoholic talking to another. You know, it's the unity, the meetings of our fellowship are where it starts, but where it really happens is one-on-one. You know, if I'm working one-on-one with another alcoholic, I know if another alcoholic walks in the room, all of a sudden 3 egos go on red alert and the conversation changes. Now all of a sudden I got a self-image to maintain. I start wondering what somebody's thinking about me, blah, blah, blah. When you're one-on-one, you can go deep. And it's an important, and for me anyway, you talk about essential elements, it's the circle and the triangle. We've been talking about it from the start of this thing. The triangle is unity, recovery, and service. Those are the 3 big activities that we go through: going to meetings, being one-on-one with other alcoholics. Book never uses the word sponsorship. That's all created by our own unwritten traditions, and service, where I on God's guidance, I act in service for my fellow man. let's see, what was I having one of those senior moments, you know. Anyway, so Silkworth says, anything's better than the way you were. The bottom of 14, my friend emphasized the absolute necessity. Now, that's pretty strong language. Absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all my affairs. And one of those principles is that it's imperative that I work with others. And this is where I think we kind of mislead each other with this whole sponsorship ideal. You know, you can be helpful to anybody in the room, anybody in the room. And it doesn't have to be, I mean, the easiest way to get in there with a newcomer is, hey, how about I'll be your temporary sponsor till you find somebody else, you know, let's just get together and take a look at the book. Let me show you what the book means to me, or where it says certain things that have had meaning for me, whatever. There are ways we can be helpful to another drunk outside of the laws of sponsorship, or whatever you would say. Imperative work with others. Faith without works is dead. It's the only, it's repeated 3 times in the first 164 pages. And it's what when we read about head in the clouds, feet on the ground, that's the same idea, you know, head in the clouds. That's great. That's a relationship with God. That's humbly relying on God, blah, blah, blah. But feet on the ground, that is where our fellow travelers are. That is where our work is to be done. That's work under the influence of faith. And it's critical. Just the understanding is not enough. Okay, how appallingly true for the alcoholic, for if an alcoholic fails to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he will not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. If he doesn't work in service, he will surely drink, and if we drink, we die. And then he goes on about how he and Lois go on to do all this stuff and make all these fast friends, and kind of ends kind of quickly. One of the things about this story in Alcoholics Anonymous comes of age is he goes through the 6 months after he gets sober and before he meets Dr. Bob, and fills it out with a lot of wonderful details. And it's just good to read, because you see the different things that he has this conversation with Silkworth, where Silkworth, I mean, it's a whole paragraph in Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age. Silkworth tells him, you can't preach to these guys. Don't focus on the spiritual experience. Focus on what they're experiencing right now, which is the allergy and the obsession. You know, you get them in by talking their language, by saying, you know, this is why my life went to hell, because I am not a safe drinker. I can't take the first drink, but my mind wants me to take the first drink. You know, that's my problem. So my mind keeps taking me back to the first drink. And that's why I'm going to have to stop this thing. I mean, I have to do something to not go back to the first drink. So, okay, I'm out of time here. I want to say something brilliant to close, and I don't know what that is. So I guess I'm just going to say thank you for your attention. Thank you for being here. I'm going to stop this recording, and we'll have some open discussion. So, boom.